Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I would like to share my personal testimony with you. Starts right here in Arcadia Valley. July of 1953, I was born about a mile from here at a little hospital in Ironton. My parents lived in Fredericktown, which is a town about 18 miles east of here. That's where I grew up with my older sister. I had a great childhood, wonderful parents. As a kid, we uh, we we played with friends in the neighborhood. I grew up with a lot of friends in town, riding our bikes, playing football. The summer we'd go to the city pool and swim. My parents liked to camp on the weekends, so we spent a lot of weekends at Clearwater Lake. And uh, for church, we were members at the Christian church on West Main. That's where I grew up going to church. I was baptized there when I was about 11 or 12. So good time as a young kid. Then once I got to high school, I really didn't have the athletic abilities to participate in the sports in high school. So I changed my focus to fast cars, girls, and parties in high school. I financed that by working at the IGA store, grocery store there in town. I worked several evenings a week and also on Saturdays. So, I had a lot of fun in my high school years. Then, near the end of my high school years, I got accepted to go to University of Missouri at Columbia. Fortunately, through high school I'd made really good grades, so that wasn't a problem. And I was really looking forward to going to school and the college life. And at that point, when I graduated from high school, I was kind of living the dream. But a week after I graduated from high school, I was in my bedroom sleeping in one Saturday morning. My parents had gone out to a nearby lake to camp, and that morning they were there with my sister and some of her friends, and they were water skiing. Well, a friend of my sister's knocked on my bedroom door and came in my bedroom and woke me up and said, "Eddie, you need to get to the hospital." So I threw on some clothes, I drove to the hospital, and when I got to the hospital, I found out that my mother had been water skiing, and when she finished water skiing, she walked up to the beach, fell over dead with a heart attack. She was only 44 years old. Well, needless to say, my world was turned upside down at that point, and I didn't handle it well. My dad didn't handle it well. My sister didn't either. I mean, my mom was really kind of the glue that kept our family together, and at that point, we really struggled. And to make it through the summer, I was working, and I was going to junior college during the summer, taking a couple classes. But when I wasn't, I was, drinking and getting high, just to deal with the pain of what I was going through, thinking that once I went to college, maybe things would be better. But then when I went to college, things didn't get better. I I got in trouble a little bit in college. I wrecked my car in college. I was struggling big time. Well, during that time, that fall, my dad had sold our house that we lived in Fredericktown, and my sister and dad had a sale, and they sold, really almost everything that was in our house. Everything in my room either got sold or thrown out. So all I owned at that point was just the little bit of stuff that I had with me in college. It was really difficult. No, no home to go back to. So I was struggling big time. And in February, I had to go back home to take care of a couple things. So I drove back in on a Friday. And on my way home, I stopped in St. Louis and bought some marijuana, bought a pound of weed. And if you know anything about weed, a pound is a lot of weed. And I had some other drugs with me, nothing serious, nothing really bad, but I had other drugs with me. But I got into town and stayed in a trailer with my sister. I rolled a couple joints and headed out to try to find a party. Well, I ran into a friend of mine and gave him one of the joints, and about 4.5 hours later, I was in Madison County Jail with the police, the sheriff's department, the highway patrol. It was bad. It was really bad. Made it through jail that weekend. On Monday, the prosecuting attorney pressed charges, and the charges were distribution of a controlled substance, felony distribution, and back in 1972, that was punishable by a minimum of 20 years up to a maximum of life in prison. Bad news. I was in jail for a few weeks. Obviously, it was horrible. I was in there, and even going through everything I was going through in jail, I was still, I had felt like I was responsible in a way for my mother's death, because I'd been kind of a wild child in high school, and I really, really was depressed and struggling with that. Being in jail and what I was facing, I believed in God, and I just cried out to God, and I said, rescue me, please get me out of this. I'll do anything to get out of this. And I even started bargaining with God, saying, hey, if I get out of this, I'll be a missionary. I'll dedicate my life to you, God. I'll be a preacher. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Well, back in those days, the wheels of justice turned pretty fast, and I ended up getting a court date. My lawyer made a plea bargain. They found out I really wasn't selling anything. I didn't buy it with the intention of selling it. So they reduced my charge to felony possession. Well, felony possession was 5 years in prison, up to 20 years in prison. So I went to court thinking there was a pretty good chance I was going to end up going to prison that day. But when I got to court, when I went into court, I looked up and I saw the judge, and the judge was like 70 years old, and when I saw him, I go, this is bad. I'm toast. So the judge called me up, and I went in front of him, and he was looking down at the papers, and he was shuffling papers, and I was standing there, expecting the worst. And he looked at me and he said, I've done some checking, and I found out kind of what you've been through the past several months. And he said, it's been pretty hard for you, hasn't it? I said, yes, sir, it's been hard. And he said, well, that's no excuse for what you did. That's no excuse for the crimes you committed and you're charged with. And I said, no, sir, I know that's no excuse. And he looked at me and he said, I could easily give you 5 years in prison, but he said, I'm going to give you 5 years probation. I think you're worth taking a chance on. I was like, okay, probation, what exactly does that mean? And he said, he told me, he said, if you so much as get any kind of offense, parking ticket, traffic ticket, whatever, any offense in the next 5 years, you're going to go to prison. And I said, go talk, the probation officers over there, go talk to your probation officer and you'll be free to go. So I went over, talked to the probation officer, made an appointment with him and for a couple weeks, but he told me, when I talked to him, he said, Ed, the judge wants you to go back to school and he wants you to focus, stay out of trouble no matter what, get your degree. And I said, yes, sir, that's what I intend to do. I mean, I was scared straight at that point. So I went back to school. Shortly after that, I got married. When I was in school, I worked for the University of Missouri, Columbia, and was slated to get my degree, and I did really good in school. Obviously, I had a lot of time to study. Did really good in school, graduating with honors in the spring of 1975. But a couple months before that, I met with my probation officer, and we were talking about what I was going to do after school. And I told him, well, I've had some interviews. I have some more interviews. I think I'm going to get some possible visits for further interviews. But I'm going to have to tell people about my felony conviction because they're going to do a background check, so they're going to find out. And he said, well, let me talk to the judge about that and see if there's anything he can do, that might be able to help a little bit with that. I said, hey, that'd be great. So a couple weeks later, he called me and asked me to come into the office. I went into his office and he said, I have a letter for you. And he handed me a letter, and I thought, oh, great, this is a recommendation letter from the judge. This is going to be really helpful. He said, it's a letter of expungement. I didn't know what that meant. So I said, okay. And he said, as of, the date on that letter, according to the records in the state, the county, the town, wherever, you did not commit any criminal offense. You have no conviction. You have no record of any conviction. It's gone. It's erased. It's like, that's crazy. I had no idea. I definitely didn't 3 years, I was just on probation for 3 years. I didn't expect anything like that. I mean, seriously, that was a miracle. And it was. Well, when I graduated from college, I was able to get a really good job with Shell Oil Company. And fast forward 17 years, my wife and I had 4 kids during that time. We moved to Houston, Texas. I had a good career. I ended up going to work for a French company that sold for international projects, sold equipment for the oil and gas industry. I worked in their office in Houston. I became president of that office in 1987. And over the next few years, I really built the operation up. I mean, we were doing really well. Had a good team of people. Life was good. During that time, my wife and I were members of a Methodist church in Katy, Texas. We helped grow that church. I was heavily involved in the church. We both were. I was, doing Bible study groups, and I got involved in real intense Bible study during that time. So, at that point again, we were living the dream. I was living the dream, and life was good. good with God, great family, great career, lived in a nice house. But in 1992, my wife and I got divorced. And I kept the house, and I had custody of the 4 children. They all lived with me. They were 16, 14, 9, and 7. 2 boys, 2 girls. That was hard. That was tough. I went for, through the couple of years, I'd be lucky to get 6 hours sleep a night. I mean, doing, daddy things, doing school things, work things, travel, run here, run back real fast. I mean, it was a big challenge, a really big challenge. But, through that, I continued to try to take the kids to church. I kept praying every day. It was, but we made it, and we made it through. In late 1993, I had tickets to a Clint Black and Wynonna Judd concert, and I had a date for it, but my date canceled on me, so I gave the tickets to my oldest daughter so she could take a friend or a date and go to the concert. But the day before the concert, she told me that she was in high school drill team, and she had a friend a year or 2 younger than her that was also in high school drill team. And her friend had a mother that was recently divorced. So they set up a blind date. So my daughter told me, you take the tickets, you can call Rachel's mom and ask her out on a blind date. So I said, okay, why not? We'll see what happens. So I called Jane, and we had a blind date. We had dinner, we went to the concert. Jane has a funny story about the concert. We dated a little bit after that. We hit a little bit of a bumpy road. She's got another story about that. But then in 1994, we fell in love. Everything was working great. We ended up getting married in early December 1994, and we're blending our families together. She had 2 daughters, doing our Brady Bunch thing. It's challenging. And, she'd been a registered nurse for a long time, and was doing really, really well as a registered nurse, and she really enjoyed it. But we found that, with all the kids and their ages and all the issues we had to deal with them, she became a stay-at-home mom, and I was working and traveling and doing everything I was needed to do to develop my career. So that was 1994, 1995. Well, fast forward again to 2002. During the interim period, my career was good. I had my ups and downs a little bit, but on an overall basis, did real well in my career. 2017 to the end of 2010, I was in Dubai working as a general manager for that Middle East operations for the company I worked for. Jane went back and forth. The kids did real well, college, and a couple of them getting married, and a couple of grandkids. We now have 14 grandkids. But that was all working out. During that time, we in late 1990s, we became members of Second Baptist Church West Campus out in Katy, and we stayed involved in the church there, involved in Bible Bible study groups and activities and things that went on a regular basis at that church. Jane joined the choir and became a very active member of the choir there. But in 2011, at the beginning of the year, I came back from Dubai. I worked for 2 years helping a Dubai-based company start a new office in Houston. But after a couple years, I kind of stepped back into a different role as a consultant for them. And so wasn't spending as much time in the office. I was working a lot from home. And when I worked from home, I developed a habit of going out in the morning. I'd take a cup of coffee and I would do a Bible study and spend some time praying. And while I did that, I'd have my quiet time and then I'd do my work thing. So I was doing that one day and sitting there, and the Bible verse I was reading was in Matthew, it was the 25th chapter of Matthew, and it was the parable of the sheep and the goats. I read that and it kind of made me think about service. And I said to myself, for years and years, I kept telling God that, I recognize you, I want to serve you, but I just don't have time. I'm working, I'm traveling, I'm doing all these things. I just don't have time. And I sat there and I thought, well, now I have a little bit of time. So, got on the Second Baptist Church website. There's a volunteer form, filled it out and submitted it. A few days later, I got a call from a lady with the children's ministry, and she said, I heard, I see that you're interested in helping. Would you be interested in helping us in kind of an administrative role with the children's ministry? And I told her no. I've raised a bunch of kids. I have grandkids now. I've been through all of that, children's stuff, and I'm just not interested in that. She said, well, okay, we'll think about it and, call me back if you want to. So I went in and I told Jane about it. And I told her, she said, well, when you filled out that form, did you tell them you weren't interested in children's ministry? I said, no. She said, well, I thought you wanted to serve God. And I was like, okay, I know, I understand, but I don't want to do that. She said, hey, and I give her full credit for this. She said, hey, if you'll do it, I'll do it with you. And so we got involved. We ended up doing that ministry for at least 4 years. It was great. I mean, we got to meet people. We got to meet parents and with their kids, and it wasn't that time consuming. So it's something we really ended up enjoying. But after I started doing that, I was in my office again one day and praying and thinking about it, and I feel like I have, some other calling, something else that God wants me to do. Well, Second Baptist Church is a mega church. It's got like 60,000 people, 60,000 members. Our campus had at least 5,000 members. The main campus is toward the city in the Memorial area of Houston. And they had a missions pastor there that was head over all the missions for all the church locations there in Houston. So I made an appointment with him, and I went in and we talked for a little while about all the different opportunities, mission opportunities, things I could do, things maybe I could lead. But if I was leaving, before I left, the guy's name was Sam Glass. Sam said, hey Ed, one last thing. He said, we have an opening for a chaplain at Harris County Jail to represent Second Baptist Church at Harris County Jail. You think you'd be interested in that? I said, absolutely not. Not a chance. No way, I'm not going to do that. He said, okay, well, you think about the different things we talked about and get back to me. So I went home and I talked to Jane about it, and I told her about the jail chaplain thing. And Jane looked at me and said, you're not going to do that. I mean it, you're not going to do that. She said, if you do that, they're going to find out your name, they're going to find out where you live, and they're going to come here and kill both of us. I was like, okay, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. So, a couple days I was thinking about, what I could do, and thinking about the different things that Sam Glass had mentioned, and my office doing my Bible study one morning, and I did Bible study, and I said, okay, turn to the 25th chapter of Matthew. I turned Matthew 25. There it is again. The parable of the sheep and the goats. It says in there, it asks, Jesus is asking, did you feed me when I was hungry? Did you give me water when I was thirsty? Did you take care of me when I was sick? Did you give me shelter? Did you give me clothing? Did you visit me in prison? My heart, my mind, the Holy Spirit said, Ed, where were you? Where were you when you cried out and begged me to rescue you? Did I rescue you? Where were you when you said you'd do anything to get you out of that situation? Really? Will you do anything? Took 2 weeks of training, and by the end of that month, I was pushing a book cart around the cell blocks at Harris County Jail, passing out books and praying with the prisoners, leading church services at the jail. Had to do it. And Jane was okay with it. Struggled, but she was okay. She understood. Well, a few weeks later, through some strange circumstances, I heard about a prison unit out in West Houston, West Harris County. There were several prison units out there. And this one prison unit needed a church to take over a service that another church had dropped. And so the person I talked to about it gave me the information. I called the state chaplain that was the head chaplain for the state over all those units, and talked to him about it. And he said, we have a Catholic church that does a service on Sundays, but we don't have any Protestant church for that prison unit. It'd be great if Second Baptist would have a service there, as a Protestant service for that facility. He said, can you talk to them and see if they have a staff pastor that would be interested in leading a service for us? And so I called Sam Glass and I talked to him about it, and I said, do you have a staff pastor that could lead, a service there? And he said, I don't have a staff pastor, but I have you. It's like, what? He said, you said you had a calling for the jail and prison ministry. Do you? Well, I went back and I called the state chaplain up and I said, hey, listen, I'm your man. I'll lead the services there. What evening is good for you to do the services? And he said, well, we can't do it in the evening because the men are working or doing their rehabilitation program all day. So we can't do it in the evenings. The Catholic Church does Sunday, so you're going to have to do your service on Saturdays. It's like, no. I'm a golfer. I golf on Saturdays. That's my day to golf with my friends. I enjoy that. That's something that's really important to me. No. A couple weeks later, Saturday, I was there at the prison unit, and the first few times I was by myself. So I was going into the unit and going into their chapel, and no guards in there. Just men would come in, and be me and a whole bunch of guys. And I led a church service. Well, I talked about it to some of the people in my Bible study class at church, and said, hey, boy, I would love it if some of you would, come in there with me. I can help you go through the process, and as long as you don't have any issues that pop up, you can come in there with me. I mean, I'm leading the service. You don't have to worry about that. Well, I had people volunteer to do music, volunteer to just go in and pray with people, men and women. It was okay for me to bring women in. And I mean, I was really surprised that people were willing to do it. Now, they didn't do it every time. I mean, sometimes I'd have, 2 or 3 people with me. Sometimes I'd have 10 people with me. Jane would come for the holiday services, and she'd usually bring 1 or 2 people with her from the church choir, and they'd lead the music for the Christmas and Easter services. But, I ended up doing that along with the jail for almost 8 years. And I didn't stop that ministry until COVID started, and then we moved to Missouri. Well, the prison unit that we were going to ended up during COVID, it ended up being closed. So, well, one last thing I want to share with you about it was when I first started the jail ministry. I'd only been going there maybe 4 or 5 weeks, and it was overwhelming. I mean, that place. I mean, in Harris County Jail, there's 6,000 people in there at a time, and I was mostly ministering to the people on the 5th floor, which is pretty hardcore people. I mean, a lot of them were in shackles, so when they left their cell block. So it was hard for me. I mean, I was praying. I prayed every time. I parked about 4 blocks away, and I had to walk in. And every time I'd walk in, I'd pray and pray for protection, and pray for God to do His thing. Use me to do His thing while I was in there. But that day, I was walking in, praying, and I was complaining. I was complaining to God. I was like, I don't like this. I'm intimidated. This is really too hard, and I just don't like it. And I said, God, there's 6,000 people here. I'm not going to make a difference. I mean, what can I do? I mean, these are some really bad people. I mean, what can I do here? He stopped me right there on the sidewalk. I mean, literally, I came to an abrupt halt. God spoke into my heart and into my mind. And he said, Ed, you're not here to save 6,000 people. You're here to find one lost sheep. One of my lost sheep is in there. You have to find him. Starting today. You may find him today. You may not find him next week. You may not find him for a month. You may not find him for a year. But you have to keep looking for one lost sheep. That's all I'm asking you to do. Nothing more. Find one lost sheep. That was transformative for me. I mean, that completely changed the way that I looked at and I approached, the way I preached, the way I talked to guys when I would take the book carts into the cell blocks, the way I would pray with guys. I didn't worry about the people cussing at me or intimidating me or any of that kind of stuff. I quit worrying about all that. I quit worrying about what offenses they committed, why they were there. I didn't care about that. One lost sheep. Where is he? I want to share the gospel with one lost sheep. That's all. 2 weeks later, the first lost sheep. Next few weeks, a few more lost sheep. Time by time, one at this service, 2 at that service, 8 at that service. More lost sheep every time. Same thing in prison. Lost sheep. 30, 40, 50, 60 men in a service, just trying to find one lost sheep. Men would come down. Men would ask for me to pray with them, my team to pray with them, to accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. For the Christmas services, Easter services, some other special services that we did, communion services that we did, dozens of men would come forward, many of them weeping. Most of the time, when I told my testimony like I'm telling you today. You know, I had friends, I've talked about this with friends, and I've had people say to me, you know, Ed, was that just, you think that was just jailhouse conversions? You think, were they really saved? Did they really understand what they were doing? And, I told them, I said, I don't know. I'm not God. I'm just his messenger. I was just there looking for sheep. And he sent, I didn't send the sheep. He sent the sheep to me. And I was just there to give them the good news of Jesus Christ when they came forward. The saving's in his hands, not in mine. But I told them, there's one thing I know for sure. I was a lost sheep. And he rescued me. If any of you out there today feel like you're a lost sheep, give me a call or send me an email at edtenon@gmail.com. I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to pray with you. Because if you're a lost sheep, Jesus wants you. Jesus wants you to come home. Thank you.